Drive to the airport felt normal. That's the part I keep coming back to. How completely, utterly normal it felt. My daughter was in the passenger seat, her husband driving, and I was in the back with my small carry-on wedged between my feet. We were coming home from what she had called a long overdue girls' trip, 4 days in Vancouver, just the two of us, before her husband flew in to drive us back to Thunder Bay together. That was the plan, anyway. I remember looking out the window at the mountains and thinking, this was good, this was what we needed. I should have paid more attention to the way she kept checking her phone. Her name is Brenda, my daughter. She'll be 43 this March. Her husband is Dale, quiet man, works in logistics, never had much to say to me even after 12 years of marriage to my daughter. I never pushed it. You don't push with men like Dale. They close like doors. At the airport, Brenda said she needed to use the washroom before security. Dale took both their bags and said he'd check in at the counter. I stood near the departures board with my purse and my carry-on and I waited. The board clicked and shifted. An Air Canada flight to Toronto, a WestJet to Calgary, our flight to Thunder Bay boarding in 50 minutes. She came back from the washroom with her phone in her hand and a look on her face that I can only describe now as rehearsed, like she had been practicing it. "Mum," she said, "Dale and I have been talking." That's never a good sentence. Nothing good has ever followed those words in the history of families. She told me they weren't coming back. Not on this flight, not today. They had decided to spend another week in Vancouver, a sort of impromptu extension. She said it so casually, like she was telling me the restaurant had changed their menu. She said my ticket was already confirmed, that I was all set, that I'd be fine. I asked where my return ticket was. She said it was on my phone. She'd forwarded the email. I looked, and there was nothing. My inbox had nothing from Air Canada, nothing from the travel site she'd used to book everything. I told her that. She said to check my spam folder. I am 67 years old. I taught elementary school for 31 years in the same building in Thunder Bay. I am not a woman who panics. But standing in that airport, watching my daughter not quite meet my eyes, I felt something shift under me, the way ice shifts on a lake in early spring. You don't hear it crack, you just feel it move. I asked her directly, "Did you actually book me a return ticket?" She said of course she did. I found out at the counter that she had not. The Air Canada agent, a young woman with a neat bun and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, was very kind. She checked my name 3 times. She tried different spelling variations. She even checked under my married name, which I haven't used in 22 years. There was no return booking. There was nothing. A standby seat on the next flight to Thunder Bay would cost $412, and that flight didn't leave until the following morning. I had my credit card, but I had just paid my property taxes the week before, nearly $3,000, and I wasn't sure what room I had left on it. I still went that counter, and I did the math in my head the way I used to do during budget season at the school, quietly, without showing anything on my face. I called Brenda. She didn't pick up. I called again. Voicemail. I texted, "I need you to call me right now. There is no ticket." The 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Then her reply came through. "Mum, I'm sure it's a glitch. Just buy a new one and I'll pay you back." I stood there reading that message for a long time. I had known Brenda's father for 26 years before he passed. I had been a mother for 43 years. I had navigated parent-teacher conflict in school board politics and a cancer diagnosis 6 years ago that turned out to be nothing, thank God, but for 2 weeks I thought it was something. I am not a woman who falls apart easily. But I sat down on a bench near the departures board, and I put my hand over my mouth and I let myself have 30 seconds. Just 30. Then I picked my purse back up and I went to figure out what to do next. The airport hotel was $230 a night. I booked one night. I ate a $6 granola bar from a vending machine because I couldn't bring myself to spend anything more until I understood what was happening. I lay in the hotel bed with the curtains open and the lights of the parking structure outside, and I called my neighbor, Margaret. She has a key to my house. She waters my plants when I'm away. She picked up on the second ring. "Something's wrong," I said, and just those two words came out strange, like they belonged to someone else. I told her everything. Margaret has been my neighbor for 19 years. She is 71 and she has opinions about everything, and she is exactly the kind of person you want on the phone when you are lying in a hotel bed in Vancouver, not understanding what your life has become. She said, "You come home first, we figure it out after. Just get yourself home." She offered to put a flight on her own card and have me pay her back. I told her I'd try mine first. It went through, barely. $412, and I had to close my eyes when I pressed confirm. I landed in Thunder Bay the next afternoon. Margaret was at the arrivals area, even though I hadn't asked her to be. She was standing with a Tim Hortons cup and her big wool coat, and she looked at me and said, "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't," I said. We sat in her car in the parking garage, and I told her the whole thing again, more slowly this time, and while I was talking, I started doing what I should have done at the airport the moment Brenda didn't pick up. I started thinking, why Vancouver specifically? Why the extension? Why the invitation had come so suddenly? She'd called me 6 weeks ago. Very warm, very eager. Said she'd booked everything. Said she wanted to reconnect. She and I had been, not distant exactly, but careful with each other for the past couple of years. There had been conversations about money that had not gone well. She had asked me twice about the house. My house. I bought it in 2003 with the insurance money from her father's life policy. It's a modest place, 3 bedrooms, a finished basement, backs onto a ravine. In Thunder Bay, that's not nothing. The property value has gone up considerably in 20 years. I know because I had it assessed 2 years ago when my financial advisor suggested I look at my overall assets. Brenda knew I'd had it assessed. I had told her. I went home. I walked through every room slowly. Everything looked the same. My reading chair, my kitchen table, the photographs on the hallway wall. But something felt like a held breath. I went to my filing cabinet. I keep everything there, insurance papers, the deed, my will, tax documents, all of it. I have a system. I've had the same system since 1987. The folder with my property documents was not where it was supposed to be. I went through every drawer, every folder. I am careful and I am organized, and I had not moved those papers. I stood in my spare bedroom with the filing cabinet open, and I understood, finally and completely, what had happened. She had been in my house. While I was in Vancouver, she had been here. She had my spare key. I'd given it to her years ago for emergencies. I had never taken it back because she was my daughter, and I trusted her. And why would you ever think to take back a key from your own child? The property deed was gone. My will was gone. 2 folders, both gone. I called Margaret back. Then I called a lawyer. His name is Stuart Chen. He has an office on Cumberland Street. A friend of a friend had recommended him a while back, and I had his card in my address book. I called his office at 8:30 the next morning and spoke to his assistant and explained, as calmly as I could, that I believed my daughter had removed legal documents from my home and that I needed to understand what that meant. Stuart called me back within an hour. He was careful and methodical, and he did not make me feel foolish, which I appreciated more than I could say. He asked me detailed questions when I had last seen the documents, whether Brenda had power of attorney over anything, whether I had signed anything in the past few months. I had not given her power of attorney. I had not signed anything. He said the most important immediate step was to contact the Ontario Land Registry to see if any transfer or change of ownership had been filed on my property. Nothing had been filed, not yet. Stewart said yet is the important word here. He advised me to do several things quickly: replace my locks immediately, file a report with the Thunder Bay Police Service documenting the missing documents, contact my bank to ensure no changes had been made to accounts she might know the details of, and he would file a caveat on my property, which is a legal notice that essentially flags any attempted transaction on the title and stops it from going through quietly. I had the locks changed the same afternoon. The locksmith was a young man who didn't ask questions, which was a mercy. I gave Margaret the new key. I did not give Brenda one. The police report was harder. I sat across from a constable who was younger than my daughter, and I told him that my child had stolen documents from my home. Saying it out loud was different from thinking it. He was professional. He took notes. He said they would follow up, that in cases involving family members and property documents, the process could be slow, but that the report itself was important to have on record. I came home from the police station and I made myself a proper meal for the first time in 3 days: scrambled eggs, toast, tea. I sat at my kitchen table alone and I ate every bite. Brenda called that evening. I answered. She said she'd heard I had the locks changed. She'd driven by and tried her key. Her voice was tightly controlled, the way it gets when she's trying not to sound like what she is. I said, yes, I changed the locks. Silence. She said, Mum, we should talk. I said, you took documents from my house, Brenda. More silence. Then, I was just looking at some things. I was going to put them back. Looking at some things. Looking at a property deed and a will. I asked her directly, did Dale put you up to this, or was this your idea? She hung up. I didn't chase it. I had been told by Stewart not to have substantive conversations with her without documenting them, and I had already said more than I intended. I wrote down the time of the call, the duration, and what she had said word for word while it was still fresh. Over the next 3 weeks, here is what I learned from Stewart, and from my own careful digging. Dale's business had not been doing well. There had been a legal dispute with a former partner, a settlement that had cost them significantly. They had refinanced their own home twice. They had talked to a mortgage broker about options. Options being a polite word for how much could they leverage against something they didn't yet own. Brenda had apparently told at least one person, a mutual family friend who came to me herself, uncomfortable, not wanting to be in the middle, but feeling I should know, that she was going to be inheriting the house anyway and was looking at how to move things along. Move things along. I am 67 years old. I had a clean cancer scan last spring. My doctor says I am healthy. I walk 4 kilometers every morning when the weather allows. I am not moving along on anyone's schedule but my own. Stewart filed the caveat. It cost me $640 in legal fees for the initial work, which was not nothing on a teacher's pension, but it was the most important $640 I had ever spent. The caveat meant that if Brenda or Dale or anyone else attempted to file any kind of transfer or lien on my property, it would flag immediately, and Stewart would be notified before anything could be processed. She did try. About 5 weeks after I changed the locks, Stewart called me to say that someone had attempted to file an authorization form at the Land Registry office, a form that, if the underlying documentation were valid, could have been a step toward a transfer of ownership. Stewart's caveat stopped it. The form had my name on it. The signature was not mine. That is when it became a criminal matter. I do not want to describe the following months in detail because they were exhausting in a way I don't have language for, the kind of exhaustion that isn't about sleep. It's about constantly managing your own grief while also managing a process that requires you to be clear-headed and accurate and present. My daughter was formally investigated. Her husband was formally investigated. I gave a statement. I provided documentation of everything: the missing folders, the hotel receipt from Vancouver, the phone records showing her non response, the testimony of the family friend. In the end, Brenda received a conditional discharge with 2 years probation and was required to complete community service hours. Dale received a more serious charge. He was the one who had located a notary willing to process questionable documentation, which is a different and graver matter, and he received a 12-month conditional sentence. Their lawyer argued for leniency given no prior record. The judge noted that the victim was the defendant's elderly mother, which was an aggravating factor. I sat in that courtroom and I listened to my daughter characterized as a defendant and myself characterized as a victim, and I thought about the day she was born, a Thursday in March. A snowstorm so bad her father had to leave the car 3 blocks from the hospital, and we walked. I thought about her as a 7-year-old who had a phase of collecting interesting rocks and kept them in a shoebox under her bed. I thought about the woman she became: capable, determined, sharp, and how those qualities had been turned toward this. I still think about those things. She and Dale separated 8 months after the sentencing. She called me once, about a year ago now. She didn't apologize. Not exactly. She said she wanted me to know she understood what she'd done. I said I appreciated that. We didn't speak for long. I don't know what we are to each other now. I'm not sure there's a word for it. She is still my daughter. That doesn't go away. But trust, real trust, the kind built over a lifetime, you can't reconstruct that the way you can change a lock. It's either there or it isn't. What I want to say to anyone listening who is in a situation that feels like yours might be heading somewhere you don't want it to go: document everything, not because you're paranoid, but because paper protects you when words fail. Get a lawyer before you think you need one. File the report even when filing it feels absurd. The legal system is slow and imperfect, and it is also the only system there is. And change your locks. Don't wait. My house is mine. I walk through it every morning with my tea, and I look at the ravine out the back window and I think, I built this. I paid for this. I kept this. No one is moving things along but me. I keep thinking about the granola bar, $6 from a vending machine in a Vancouver airport hotel, eaten alone at 11 o'clock at night because I couldn't justify spending more until I understood what had happened to my own life. That image stays with me more than the courtroom, more than the sentencing, more than any of the difficult conversations that followed. That granola bar, and the particular stillness of eating it. What I've come to understand, slowly, the way you understand anything that costs you something, is that what Brenda and Dale didn't begin the day they took those folders from my filing cabinet. It began much earlier, in small choices, in the decision to see a person's home as an asset rather than their life, in the decision to let financial pressure justify a plan they would never have spoken aloud at a dinner table. Actions like that don't arrive fully formed. They grow from a direction someone chooses to move in, one quiet step at a time. And my own part in it, because I've sat with this long enough to be honest, was in the years I didn't ask hard questions. I sensed the conversations about money were leading somewhere uncomfortable, and I chose comfort instead of clarity. I told myself it was kindness. It wasn't, quite. It was avoidance wearing kindness as a coat. What pulled me through wasn't any single thing. It was a combination of qualities I had spent 67 years building without ever thinking of them that way. The first was simply knowing right from wrong and being willing to act on it, even when the wrong was done by someone I loved. Walking into that police station and filing that report was one of the hardest things I have ever done. It would have been easier not to. But easier is not the same as right, and I have known that since I was young enough to teach it to other people's children. The second was thinking clearly under pressure, not panicking at the airport, not calling Brenda back in anger after she hung up on me. Going to my filing cabinet first, then calling Margaret, then calling Stuart. Doing things in the right order. Grief and betrayal can make you want to react, to say the sharp, true thing, to let someone know exactly what you think of them. I had to keep choosing over and over to be strategic instead of emotional. That discipline is its own kind of strength. And the third, the one I'm most grateful for, was simply refusing to stop. There were days in those months when I was very tired, when the legal process felt like it would never resolve, and I was spending money I hadn't planned to spend, and coming home to a house that felt different than it used to. On those days, I made my tea. I walked my 4 kilometers. I called Margaret, and I kept going. Not because I was certain everything would turn out well, because stopping was not something I was willing to do. My house still backs onto the ravine. The leaves are just coming in now, that particular pale green that only lasts about 2 weeks before it deepens into summer. I look at it every morning. I built this. I kept this. That is enough.